Why AI will never replace 3D artists. The truth. Everyone keeps saying AI is going to replace 3D artists, but here's the truth. AI will never replace 3D artists. And today, I'll break down exactly why and what you need to know to stay ahead. What we will talk about? In this video, you'll discover why AI lacks the one thing every great artist brings to the table, the hidden skills 3D artists have that AI can't touch, and how the future of AI and 3D artists will actually work together. About me, my name is Dwayne Elahie. I'm a CG supervisor. I've been in the industry for 20 years plus. I've been mentoring for about 15 years plus now. Hundreds of students, many of them now work in the industry with a salary of $70K and plus. And these are the places I've been at. Been at EA Sports or EA Studios, Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, Pixar, Disney, to name a few. Been at DreamWorks and other places as well. You could check out my IMDb and see projects I've worked on, such as the Netflix The Witcher, James Cameron's Avatar. I was the CG character rigging supervisor for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. Been in Cloudy with Jets and Meatballs franchise. And current projects that are out right now, number one on Netflix, K-pop Demon Hunters. I've built tools for that. Same thing for Spider-Man Enter the Spider-Verse. A lot of the tools that I built in Cloudy with Jets and Meatballs, they propagated to all these projects. As I mentioned before, I was a CG character supervisor for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Mutant Mayhem. Netflix The Witcher, Marvel, worked on stuff from Marvel projects, latest, the one that on Disney Channel, The Secret Invasion, James Cameron's Avatar, other things as well as Hunger Games, but you can check out my IMDb for more. So let's get into it. The top 3 reasons why AI will never replace 3D artists. Reason number 1, AI lacks true creativity and intent. So AI can generate variations. It doesn't originate ideas, right? So what basically it is, AI, how it's being used right now, especially this, what's called supervised learning, where you give it a lot of examples and it tries to find pattern. It's basically a universal function approximator. A lot of fancy words, but basically what that means is give it a lot of data and it tries to find a pattern, a closest match pattern that could go into it. If you ever did math before, and you might understand that there's equations, for example, like the parabolic equation, like y equals x squared, for example, that if you know the exact formula, you know the pattern of, if you give in a value, you'll know what the result will be, right? What AI does, a universal function approximator, is that we don't know, we were not given the equation, but there's a pattern there. Try to reverse engineer and figure out what a pattern is. So basically, it's just once it figure out something that he thinks is working, it basically just makes variation according to that pattern that it finds, right? So that's all it's really doing under the hood. So it doesn't understand story, culture, emotion. That's what an artist brings to the table, right? So artist infuses their vision, their intent, their personality into a character, an environment, into a scene. So there's a difference between a cinematographer and a videographer. And I actually talk about this in an upcoming podcast episode that we're releasing with color scientists, right? And a videographer, you could kind of think of as AI, or is more of like technical. You just take the shot and you show it as is, right? Think of it as even nowadays it's getting more technical, but let's say a wedding videographer. A lot of wedding videographers just take the shots, cut them together, and present it. Though nowadays there are higher end ones where they actually do cinematography, where there's actual intent, where the final image, the color grading that's designed, the film grain, the motion blur, the frame rate, all those things, the exposure, all those things are decided on purpose. The depth of field, all those things are decided on purpose to give a certain emotion and vision and intent and personality into a shot. You've seen trailers of movies where you could take a couple of shots, cut it together. If you put a certain music to it, put a certain pace or certain beats to it, the way you feel, it could generate or elicit a different emotion that you intend to do. When you're basically storytelling, like when you want to show a hero character or the villain or the antagonist or protagonist, You're all doing that through your art. It's very subjective, and it's really up to the artist to guide their audience or the person who's intaking their art to give them that feeling. So AI doesn't do that. It's not trying to guide. Again, it's looking for patterns. That's what's been done and just replicating that, right? The other thing is, without human direction, AI outputs often feel generic, mismatched, soulless. An example of this, like a concept artist interprets a script, right? It brings in the emotion. AI just pretty much just shuffle pixels around. They look at, okay, this has been done before, we'll just modify that and put that out, right? This is why when you see something for the first time that it elicits emotions, when you see replicas of it right after, it doesn't do the same thing, because it's already been done, and you could just say that, okay, all you try to do is just copy this other thing, right? Now, the other thing as well is reason number 2 that why AI will never replace 3D artists is that technical mastery and problem solving. And let me explain this, right? 3D pipelines involve far more than pretty pictures. What's involved to generate the final pixels that you see on screen? There's modeling, there's rigging, there's shaders, there's optimizations, there's animations, simulation, rendering, all this stuff is happening to generate the final image. And whether it's doing it nowadays offline, meaning it's pre-calculated and then it's generated out, or real time where it's calculated fast enough that we interpret it as real time. It's fast enough that it's real time renderings that are done, that the results are given to us in real time. And the thing is, each one of these departments is an art on its own. It's an expression in style and also in medium. And what I mean by that, why would we do, let's say, a 3D movie, or why would we do a 2D movie or hand-drawn movie, why would we do a stylized one? It's because we want to express ourselves or tell the story in a certain way. For example, another upcoming podcast episode that we have is with the director of Kung Fu Panda, and he also directed the movie The Little Prince, or Le Petit Prince, which actually I worked on. I mentioned that if you look at my IMDb here, The Little Prince over here, right? He was the director of that. And the reason why I'm bringing that up, because if you watch that movie specifically, it's a CG film, right? It's actually done in it's CG film and actually stop motion. It's done in 2 different fields. So if you know the original story, The Little Prince or Le Petit Prince, it's been around for like 70, 80 years. It's really big in like Japan and France and whatnot, but worldwide, right? But if you read the story, it's actually an abstract story. So how do you convert that to a classic like Hollywood, CG movie? The challenge that the director did is that, okay, well, we'll have a surrounding story that is like that, but parts of it, they read the book or tell the story of the original Little Prince, and it kind of like the imagery or the flow of the movie goes into that medium. And what I mean by that, so the regular story is CG, something that you'll see like Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney, Illumination would do, right? But then when they go into the Little Prince story, which is more abstract, it goes into a stop motion. So the style is completely different. And the other thing as well is that in the CG version, when you're telling the regular story at the little girl and the pilot and whatnot, everything is a lot more desaturated. It's more black and white or not as much color in it. Whereas when you go into and also as well, they use stereo vision as well. If you're using 3D glasses, it's flat. But when you go into the story of the Little Prince, they have stop motion. It's also very vibrant colors, very saturated colors, and also there's depth of field using stereo with the glasses as well. So those are actual direct artistic choices to give the viewer that a lot of times the viewers, if I didn't mention it and if you saw the movie, probably wouldn't have noticed, but you would have felt it. And that is a direct intent that the director did. And actually in the podcast, we explain that like as a director or as an artist, you're purposely trying to inject these type of your artistry or feel, or try to get to elicit an emotion to the audience. You're always trying to find a way. What's the best way to do it? What's the best medium to do it? So just asking AI will output something, but is not necessarily with intent, right? And going back to this, so AI can't constantly solve technical challenges like topology flow for rigging, UV layout for games, or optimize assets for real-time engines. But what I mean by that is that you're thinking, okay, well, there are tools that are using even AI where I can press a button and it automatically remeshes my topology for me. Yeah, but again, that's following a certain pattern. The thing is about that is that if you look at CG or 3D graphics throughout the decades, we could go back, let's say, to the 80s where it was done, where we decided to do 3D. Like one of the breakthrough CG projects or 3D projects was Tony Depeltry. If you look that up during the 80s, I forgot what year, for SIGGRAPH. I worked with, there's 4 people who worked on that, and they went on to create Softimage, XSI, or the original Softimage, right? And at the time, they were inventing techniques. Part of that is also figure out topology given their limitation at the time. And I like to go by, over the years, the measurement of, I use PlayStation just because it's enumerated, where you have PlayStation, it's PlayStation X or PSX, but PlayStation 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and now we're at PS5, right? The thing is, 3D or the way it works haven't really changed. So each one, in terms of the simplistic way it's actually done, you have points, you have edges, you have faces. Now the thing is, you have limitations throughout what you could do at that time, right? So the topology and rigging workflow that you had in PlayStation 1 is not the same as PlayStation 2, which is not the same as 3, as 4, as 5, as you can tell. And then same thing with the UAV layouts and even optimizing assets for real-time engines. The thing is about that is that always in the CG or 3D industry, we're always on the cutting edge. We're always on doing something new, pushing something that hasn't been done before. So if you're using AI, it's going to take all the data that's been done and give you a solution based on what's been done. Whereas always the next project, we're pushing something further where it hasn't been done before. So how do we know what the optimal topology workflow is? We actually don't know, because it's a mixture of what's our limitations of the technology, what's the limitation of the creativity, plus what's our time of the actual project, what's our time, budget, the quality we were trying to hit, and how much money do we have, the resources we have available. You're trying to balance all these things to give an output. So there isn't an optimal output. And even if you think for one project, going back to the example of the Little Prince movie, you might have an intent of what you actually want to do. Sorry, just turn that off. You actually have an intent of what you actually want to do for the output of the project, right? And it might not, you might want to do a realistic style, you might want to do a stylized style, right? So there isn't, given the mixes of what you want to express, plus the reality of productions, of the resources and the time, the quality you're trying to hit, you're trying to balance everything, and things are going to change. Plus there's iterations. There isn't a solution and that's it, or else everyone would be or else 3D would have been solved a long time ago, in the sense that, okay, we know how to do this movie, or how we do this game, or how we do this project. Everyone do it exactly like that forever, and then we're done. But that's not the case, right? So the other thing is, every production has unique constraints. I just mentioned that. I was just going over that, right? So memory limits, art direction, gameplay mechanics. If you're doing a game, movie, right? What back in when I was working on films like 20 years ago, right? Doing HD, or let's say, HD TVs were coming on. So even doing TV series or shows or episodics, right? How we're gonna making the pipeline an HD pipeline was a big deal. Or how do we even see that in real time? What codecs we need to do? Then, okay, we're doing that, but now we're doing a film. Now that's 4K. How do we create our assets so we're able to do it 4K and be able to render on time? I remember when we first started doing that, our render farm would overheat and the whole thing was shut down. And it kept happening all week that we just took the week off. And while they upgraded the systems, these are real things that happen. Or later on in other projects where you're trying to render things out, and then everyone finished at the same time, and we didn't scope how much render farms did we need. We had to on premise, meaning on the premises that we actually had in the studio. So we had to go rent that out. Now there's a logistic issue of how do we manage the assets, how do we protect it, send it out, generate them, bring them back, make it compatible. Plus we're using different plugins, different pipelines. There's a lot of things you have to do. And not only that, you still dealing with art direction. At the end of the day, the science and the technology is to support art. So we have to figure out all that stuff. Even more so as well for games. One thing that's different in film and game is that in a film, we have, scene sequences and shots, right? And they're pretty much modular. So usually in a film pipeline, things change and everyone's a little different, but in general, in a film pipeline, since all that's already figured out in editorial and when you're doing the storyboards and whatnot, that okay, by the time we get to the production side, or even layout or previs, right? We know we're working on this one shot. It's kind of, I guess, in machine learning or AI world, you call it stochastic, meaning that it's self-contained. It's not affected by anything else. You could do just that shot one by itself. So, for example, if you build a rig and you have modeling and you have set dressing and you light that one shot, it's its own world. You could render it and render out, get the final images, generate the AOVs or the layers for compositing. AOV stands for arbitrary object of their variables. Basically, you could think of it as layers for compositing, but you could generate it for anything like puzzle maps or things like that, masks, whatever, ambient occlusion, whatever. So you could generate those, and those are standalone. And then months later, you could have a different rig, different asset versions and whatnot, and made another shot. But if you have to go back to that shot because art direction changed it, you have to go and load that environment, and when I mean environment, the actual technical environment, like the OS, the OS version, the software versions, the rig versions, the modeling versions, the texture versions that work together, and re-render that one shot because it's by itself. So you could have one version of the rig, one version of the model, one version for one shot, or that combination, or that I guess chain of, or you can think of it as a tool chain or whatnot, to make that one shot and work on another shot, and it's completely different. In a game, on the other hand, that's different because every single asset all have to work anytime you update it because the game has to compile. So if you change the rig, for example, right, let you add a bone, and it's possible, I've been on productions where the bone wasn't dynamically loaded, it's pre-allocated in the code. So if you change it, it breaks the whole game because now when it's compiling, I'm like, okay, let me look for the rig or the bones of the character so it can move, and I can't find it, and it will break down. So the thing is, with all that being said, there's a lot. If you're working on games, you have different constraints than you're working on film, even though the art direction might be the same in terms of like what the story, what the cinematography is going to be and whatnot. But you're never going to know unless you know what your unique constraints are for the project. Time, quality, money, resources, skill set, things like that. Tools you're using. And the other thing is, because of this, 3D artists adapt and troubleshoot. That's kind of like what keeps us going. That's kind of like how you get hired, is what problems in production that have you overcome, right? That you've overcome. This is another reason why I think I talked about this in another video, is that just because you put your stuff on ArtStation as an artist, that doesn't necessarily a studio would want to hire you, because you have to be able to adapt and troubleshoot given the constraints of production, right? So AI can't really do that because every production generally does the same thing, but there's slight differences of how they work, skill sets, the types of project, the style and all that things will change. If you're doing a painterly style project, or let's say you're doing a show that's mainly, let's say, a commercial, and it's mainly compositing, I don't know, you're doing, let's say, a commercial for yogurt, and everything's all like motion graphics, and you're just doing like product visualization, things like that, a lot of slow motion and time remapping, time warping, whatever. That's very different if you're doing a heavy character animation, or maybe it's a one shot that the camera never cuts and you're running through a city, right? Now you have to build an entire city. Now you have to be able to render or load scenes that could somehow load multiple characters and never cuts the scene, and you can't cheat, or maybe you do it in a crowd system. It's very different, right? So AI can't really just give you an answer, because there isn't really one great answer, depending on what you have and what you could do, right? It basically, AI already search for patterns for what has already been done, and if you worked in this, anyone who's worked in this 3D industry will know that we always do something different, slightly different each project. It's like the same overall in the sense of what we do, but it's different because how things are put together. So we always have to kind of like reinvent the wheel, right? So an example of this, a 3D artist might be making assets for Unreal. They must balance beauty with performance, right? So I've mentioned this before I like to measure the eras of PS1, PS2 to PS5 for up to now, right? Mainly because if you're saying, okay, I'm going to do Unreal. Well, I guess Unreal wasn't PS1, but let's pretend like I think around the PS2, PS3 era, I'm going to do assets for Unreal, but it's for target is a PS2, PS3 platform. The balance between beauty and performance would be very different than if it's PS5, what you can and can't do, right? So one thing about artists is that creativity comes from limitation. And you'll notice this just in human nature in general, right? If you're not given a deadline, right, when generally happens, there's no urgency. Most likely you won't do anything at all. That's why a lot of artists been working on projects for years. Now that they work on it consistently for years, it's just that they're going for the feel, and they're just, when they feel inspired, they'll work on it. If they're not, they'll stop. When you have a deadline, when you're a 3D artist in a production, think about that, right? The movie's already been announced. Marketing's been done years before. In fact, if you think about it, the movies haven't even been made yet, but it's announced. There's a buzzword and everyone's excited, but you have to go create it. But the poster's already made, the date's already set. That's why there's always a high pressure, and there's limitations because, like, hey, the date's set, the posters are made, you have to finish it by this date. So whatever by a certain deadline pencils down, whatever you give, that's what you have. And that's where creativity comes in, where you're like, okay, well, we have to deliver, let's say in 2 weeks. I would like to do all these things. There's always a balance between time, money, and quality, but you'll never get it perfect. Given the deadline, we'll have to make some compromise to get to the deadline, and you start becoming creative. If we go back to the 3D assets for Unreal, must be balanced between beauty and performance. Well, maybe on Unreal, but let's say we're doing a game, PS1, Final Fantasy VII, the original one, on PS1, they use vertex colors to color the characters, because they did not know the memory limitations, even how they're going to load and unload the game. So their solutions were going to make three CD discs. We're going to use vertex colors, right? Now fast forward to PS4, and then now PS5 for the Final Fantasy VII remakes and Rebirth and all that stuff. Way more powerful. So obviously the constraints, the balance, what's considered acceptable for the beauty and performance is way different, even though overall you're playing the same game in the sense of like the story, at least. I mean, that's debatable, but that's an idea. Like, if you know what your target is, what you could do, and even a lot of the team come back working on the same franchise with the same intent, your output and your creativity is greatly dictated by your limitations, right? And let's go into reason number 3 why AI will never replace 3D artists, right? This is a big thing. Collaboration and human context. Films, games, and ads are team projects, right? You have directors, you have designers, you have programmers, you have producers, and they all collaborate. There's a lot more. When you say designers, you could go with the actual artists in there, like modelers, riggers, animators, who do VF or like special effects, and and simulations, and there's so many cloth effects, hair effects, grooming, a lot of things, right? A layout, there's editorial, there's storyboarding, there's there's a lot of things, right? Pre-visualization, things like that, right? Compositing. Now, AI doesn't, basically for this, right? Like, when would all these different worlds collide? Every one of these people went to school or learned their craft in very different ways. And now if you're working on a 3D project, now somehow everyone has to be a cohesive unit to make it work, right? AI. And another thing about this, a lot of times when I talk to other people from different industries, like people who do like supply chain, right? Especially engineers, it's very, pragmatic and very matter of fact. You do this. Once you finish this process, you go to the next process. Once you finish this process, you go to the next process. Working in the 3D industry is not like that, where they work in film or games or a client and anything, freelance. It's different because the end result is subjective. It's an artistic expression and what you're trying to do. So as an artist, you're trying to, and every one of these disciplines are trying to work together to interpret what that final result will be. And then you go through the whole pipeline. Once you finish, let's say we're doing a traditional 3D, a typical, let's say, 3D pipeline. Go through modeling, you UV unwrap it, you texture it, you look dev, meaning you surface it or you do the materials, the lights, how the materials will react to it. Then you rig it, you animate it, you composite, you render. You do all that, you finish all those things, and you're done, let's deliver it. Then the director or the client will look at it and like, I don't like that, I'll change it. There's a feedback loop, which means you have to go back and change things, but your deadlines don't change. That's very unique than most other industries, right? So there's revisions, there's communications to the department, reacting. You're always putting out fires. AI doesn't really understand that, because once you finish something, you would think, okay, that door is closed, we go to the next. That's not how it works. It never really is finished until you deliver it. It's just deliver whatever iteration you have right there. And it's, again, an art form, or like you're doing an artistic expression, and that's what's driving the science. So it's really not a perfect science, I would say, right? Studios rely on human artists who can interpret feedback, right? They negotiate compromises, I mentioned earlier, right? Especially if you have a movie or a game. For marketing purposes, you have to put it out there. Also to gauge and get focus groups to figure out what people want, right? And so the deadline's already made. You're dealing with, if I could draw it out here, you're mainly dealing with, let me try a different color, bigger, maybe something you could see. So negotiating compromise, I mentioned that earlier, but you're dealing with a balance of time. Actually, using a mouse, my Wacom is not, I don't know why it's not connected. It's not connected right now. So time, money, or I say resources, but money is pretty much is what covers the resources. Resources meaning financial, it could be capital, money, right? It could also be the artist pool, the talent. Do you have programmers? Do you have modelers? Do you have riggers, animators, things like that? What's your resources, right? Time, and then quality, right? So as the saying goes, you have these three things in general, and you have to get a balance between to get this triangle. And they say, you have time, money, quality, pick two of them, right? So in every project, you have to kind of balance these out. And so you have to know, that's why you have to negotiate compromise. And a lot of times if you're dealing with a client, whether it's your art director, or you're doing freelancing, you're saying, okay, well, time-wise, we have a deadline. We have to deliver this by next week, right? We could go back and fix that feedback or that revision you asked for. But if we go back, you have to understand that, no, it's going to cost money because these resources, whether it could be a tool, it could be AI tool, for example, maybe, or we have to hire someone, that costs money to do it. And if you want to have a certain quality, it's going to take certain time. So how important is that for you to get that result? And that's where the negotiation comes in, and where you basically come to a compromise there. The other thing is align with brand and style guides, right? So if you're working with a client, you'll have guidelines of things that you have to do. And again, takes time and a certain quality level you're looking for. And if this actually goes back to another video where this is a perfect example where here, let me just make this a different color. If we say, if you're doing freelance work and they're coming to you and they say, listen, we have a certain brand, a certain style that we have to adhere to, right? So and this is where you could come in and say, okay, well, you have a deadline. So there's a time that you want this delivered, right? And there's a quality. So that's this, right? That's this. Plus there's a quality aspect to it, because you want us to make sure it's on that brand and on that style. You don't want us to just deliver anything, right? So to meet these criterias, right, we could ask for, it's fair to ask for this amount of money because that's how much value or impact it is for you. That's why you're coming to you as either a freelancer, as a company or whatnot, right? And this is a negotiating part, linking back to another video I was talking about, how when you're negotiating using these metrics, this is how it is. Instead of just charging by the hour, you're like, okay, well, you want me to maintain this quality. It takes this amount of time for me to do it, and you want me to deliver at this time, and you can't get anyone else to do this. This is how much it returns to you. This is how much the value is worth to you. This is how much I could charge for it. But again, you can watch that video for more example on that. But going back to this, if we say a client here, but let's say we're at a studio and the art director is saying like, I want this, make this scene feel more heroic. And literally that's all you get as feedback, right? Very broad description, or basically it's a lack of description, right? A human artist would translate that into visuals. Okay, you want it more heroic, and they'll do different iterations of it. And because knowing the director, knowing the client, knowing where the feel of what they're trying to go for will help you craft the type of visuals that you feel that will elicit that according to the client, right? AI cannot truly get it because it's subjective. Like, what's the right answer? The client doesn't even know. I mean, look at the description. And if you work in the 3D industry, this is all you get. Very, very, very generic, broad, non-descriptive description. And you have to go and make magic. And we have to go and do this in a very pipeline-heavy process where we can't just turn it over. There's so many, I mentioned over here, there's so many people that are involved to go and make that iteration or revision, that this is where a human artist will come in, how to translate that, interpret that according to what that specific director or client wants, because they don't know what they want. AI can't really do that. It's subjective. How does an AI going to know how you make you feel, right? And for any artistry, the challenge is the point. That is the whole point. AI seeks for the most optimal solution. If you want to go for the most optimal solution, if we basically, it was done before, just keep doing that. That's it. Don't change anything, and that will be it. And that's kind of like what AI does, is that it looks, if we're looking at supervised learning, which is basically take a whole bunch of examples and then try to make something very similar to that, that's all you're going to keep getting, right? I find that's very similar to one of the problems that you might have experienced, and companies like YouTube and Netflix are trying to combat, is that recommendations, right? How many times have you gone in and clicked on one video or watched one video, and then all of a sudden they just kept showing you that one thing, and you're like, oh no, the algorithm's ruined, right? Because it thinks, okay, you like that one thing, so you must like that all the time, right? Or we've done it this one way, you want to do it all the time. Like, no, artist wants to explore different things, or you yourself, because you watch one thing one time, you might like those things and you might like it, like watching a lot of those, but you want to try other things. That's the whole point of artistry, is to explore and try different things. We seek out the challenge. The challenge is the point, right? Not just the optimal solution. Like, it worked one time, so you're always going to like it. Quick heads up for all you 3D artists watching this. If you've been grinding away at tutorials and YouTube videos but still feel stuck, I've got something special for you. I'm hosting a 3D character rapid bootcamp workshop where I'll walk you step by step through the exact skills studios actually hire for. It's not theory. This is the stuff that got me hired and working in the industry. If you want to finally build a portfolio that gets callbacks and interviews, hit the link below and grab your spot. Seats are limited, so if you're serious about going pro, this is your chance. Let's recap here. AI can't replace 3D artists because it lacks true creativity and intent. It is subjective, right? Art is subjective. How you make you feel is subjective. That's what you're trying to do, right? It cannot master technical pipelines because the challenge is the point. We're always trying to do something new. So how can you master it when we don't even know what it is? We're trying to explore, trying to elicit a new emotion and try to get everyone on board with that, right? Always try to do something different. AI will just go with what works already, right? I gave you the example, like the recommender, YouTube and Netflix, right? So you watch one thing, I'm pretty sure we all experience that. We watch one thing one time, oh, that works, keep doing that. Like, no, we want to try something different, right? So it doesn't understand, right? And it doesn't collaborate in human teams, right? Instead, what you should do is AI is here to support. It's not to replace. Think of it as an assistant, right? So you directed what you want. You're the one still driving things. You are still the architect of things, right? You're still at the top, and you're still giving the strategies of what needs to be done, right? So the next step right here, if you're a 3D artist, double down on the skills AI can't touch. Storytelling, problem solving, collaboration. These are the things that are really, really important to get you hired. Of course, skill-wise, that's a given. You have to have that. But if you're wondering why, okay, I have a great ArtStation portfolio, right? But why I'm not getting hired? It's because when you work in a production, it's a collaborative effort. You have to be able to tell your stories, problem solve, collaborate with others. These are the important skills, like a lot of the soft skills that just your technical execution or just using AI is not going to solve, right? The other thing is, well, don't be afraid of AI. Start experimenting with AI tools, right? But use them as accelerators, not crutches. Don't use it as, okay, I have to use this or else it can't work, right? And you want to build your portfolio around your unique voice, your unique style. We talked about this in another video, where by doing that, your own voice, your own style, your own brand, people will come to you because they want what you produce as an artist, right? What you're bringing to the table, your problem-solving ability, and that's exactly what clients and studios are paying for. And to go in about the unique style and voice, if you look at it, if we were just going to go from the AI point of view of just giving the final answer, right, is this has been done before, so just keep doing that. Look at comic books, DC versus Marvel. They're both are comic book companies, right? But they have different styles. They do things their own way, their own unique way, right? Or else everybody will be doing the same thing and we'll just watch one thing. Or you could look at any industry, it's the same type of thing, right? So here's a bonus tip. Future-proof yourself by learning hybrid workflows. So, for example, you could use AI for quick idea generation, for blocking out ideas, or blocking out, let's say, modeling, or use it as reference. And then after, you apply your artistic judgment to refine, to direct, to finalize the final result, right? This positions you not just as an artist, but as a creative director of AI, which will be one of the most valuable skills in the industry. Again, you shouldn't be always afraid of new tools. It's always been like that historically throughout history. So historically, right? Like if when photography came around, painters thought, okay, you're replacing us. That was not the case. Two different mediums, right? When motion capture came around, animators thought, okay, well, we don't need hand keyframe animators anymore. That's not the case. Two different things. In fact, a lot of times you use one to help generate the other. When doing stop motion, for example, having still frames, taking a picture of what the frame was before will help them do their craft, right? Whereas before, if you didn't take that trying to go by memory, you could see it's a lot more jittery. Other industries, not necessarily just creative ones, accountants. Before, in the past, if you're able to do all your accounting by hand, you were super skilled. But then Excel sheets or spreadsheets came around and it made it more accessible. And they thought, okay, well, no, I'm not as valuable anymore. That's not necessarily true. It's just a tool that helps you, and you could do other things and spend more time. So learn how to use it to make yourself better and to improve your workflow. Now, the biggest mistake to avoid, don't think of AI as your competition. That mindset makes you defensive, right? See AI as a tool, one that handles repetitive tasks, freeing you to focus on creativity and not just doing things over and over and over. And also problem solving. As I mentioned before, solving the problem is the point of being creative, right? And you want to look for the challenge, right? The artist who thrives will be the ones who use AI strategically, not fear it.